In this video, we discuss 10 types of people that do not deserve a retiree's trust. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
A bit of a disclaimer here before we begin. There are certain wholesale categories of people that you just can't trust. And there are other people that you can trust generally, but there are aspects or trademarks or characteristics of people within those categories that really suggest you shouldn't trust them. This video is about both of those types. Eleanor Roosevelt was famous for saying, great people talk about ideas. Average people talk about events. And small-minded people talk about other people. Now, she borrowed it from Socrates, but she was the one who made it famous. And so gossipers, is category number one. The fact is, gossipers, those who reveal sensitive information, private information about other people, particularly if they do it freely and regularly, just can't be trusted, because if they will do it to them, they will do it to you. For example, I feel very uncomfortable when someone I haven't talked to in a long time or someone I don't know very well starts talking about information about someone else that feels a little bit too much on the inside. Not that the information is illegal or inappropriate, I suppose, but just the fact that someone who I just met or barely know is willing to give me that level of detail is a bit troublesome. The reason is because they're probably betraying a confidence if it's true, but also they could be making it up and just starting a conversation for the sake of the shock value of the information. I had a situation happen to me one time where when our family bought this house, we were in the midst of selling another house. Now, when you buy one house and you sell another, the timing doesn't always work. And sometimes you own two houses at one time, or sometimes you don't own either house at one time. We were in the second situation. We sold the house, the first house they wanted to be in by Christmas Day, and so we had to vacate before Christmas, and the new house wasn't going to be ready until mid-January. Yet people all around town had suggested that we lost our house as a mortgage foreclosure until we moved into a slightly bigger home. And in that case, it was misinformation, but in other cases, it's just a lack of loyalty to the person who trusts you with that information or trusts them with that information. So that's not someone you would want to trust with your information, more than likely. The next category is pushy salespeople, people that are pressuring you into buying something that you don't necessarily either want or need, or it's not appropriate. For example, I was buying a suit a few years ago. It was a nice blue suit, and I went to one of the major department stores, one of the well-known department stores, because they were having a big sale. Because they were having a big sale, they didn't have complete inventory. And the salesperson looked at me and tried to get me to buy a suit that had 2 inches less chest than I actually measured across. I'm a 42. They tried to give me a 40. And they said, well, we'll just let it out. And unfortunately, I believed him until I got the suit, and it just did not fit right. And to this day, I regret saying yes to that salesperson who assured me that it was all going to be just fine. Along the same lines, pushy salespeople often get you to buy things that you don't really need, or nobody really needs, for that matter. A lot of the multi-level marketing world is built on this foundation. Now, not all of it. There's some really good products in MLM, but there's also some stuff that you probably would not want to own. The next category is overly negative people. Now, when I say overly negative people, I'm not talking about someone that has a contrarian view. I'm talking about someone that has a contrarian view about everything. And no matter what you tell them, you're either always wrong or the world is in a much worse position than the way that you see it. The other day, I was talking with someone about a good business idea, a really good business idea, and they said it won't work. Now, the first reason that they gave me was somewhat rational, although I thought it was highly exaggerated, but the second, third, fourth, and fifth were just them making it up to prove a point. And it was obvious to me that that was what was going on. Now, I have a lot of good business ideas. I have a lot of bad business ideas. And I always test them with other people because, frankly, sometimes you need someone somewhere to tell you, pay attention, you're not seeing this the right way. In this instance, though, that wasn't the case. Overly negative people also drain your energy frankly, because you're spending most of your time either lifting them up or defending yourself. Overly negative people have a tendency to focus on problems, not solutions. And when that's the case, well, you have a situation where you're not advancing your life or the idea or whatever it is you're discussing. And a lot of times they're just projecting their own insecurities on you. Because they can't or they won't doesn't mean that you can't or you won't, but because they are in the room with you at the same time, all of a sudden their views become, at least potentially become yours, even though they shouldn't in that moment. And of course, it's possible, probable, that an overly negative person undermines your relationships. If my daughter brings someone home, for example, to introduce him to me, and every single time she does it, I don't like the individual, well, it doesn't matter how great the guy is, she will never be happy with him, potentially never be happy with him, unless I acknowledge that maybe this is either a character flaw of mine or that he might be okay after all. And by the way, I don't do that with my daughter. I try to be as balanced as possible, as balanced as a dad can be in this situation. The next class of person that you need to be supremely careful with is a manipulative relative. And we all have them, or at least many of us have them anyway, but you can see them coming a mile away. And at first, it looks like they've just been hard done by because of the world, until it seems to happen again and again and again, and a pattern emerges. Now, don't get me wrong, some people actually do have a lot of bad things that happen to them over and over again, but over time, you'll see that if it happens not over a course of weeks or months or even years, but several years or decades, well, this is someone to be a little bit more wary about. Usually they exploit your emotions because they are telling you about how the world has been so bad to them and they just need some extra money. And of course, in doing so, they disregard your boundaries because in order to get what they need from you, they have to push it beyond what a normal relationship would allow, at least for a long period of time. They often create unnecessarily guilt or even violence in some instances because when you say no or you question their motives, it becomes an argument and they're so hurt by the fact that you don't believe them, yet in many cases you really shouldn't believe them. And a lot of times, many times, particularly with retirees, it undermines your independence because if you're making decisions based on what's best for them, you're not necessarily making decisions based on what's best for you. The next type of person is the chronic borrower. I call this the George Wimpy syndrome. For those of you that don't know who George Wimpy is, think back about when you were a child and you used to watch Popeye, and Wimpy would walk up to anybody and everybody and he would say, "I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." But Tuesday never happened. They borrow money and they don't repay it because they never intended to repay it. And then they borrow more. And then eventually, when you say no, they move on to someone else. And money has a way of straining relationships because when you give money to someone at that point in time, you're solving a problem, but you're creating a different problem. A different problem is that they now feel like they need to repay you, but they still don't have the money. So every time they see you, it's always some excuse. Oftentimes they'll bring it up before you bring it up, and you subliminally or overtly think about the fact that they owe you money and they're actually avoiding you in some cases. And finally, in this category, chronic borrowers have a tendency to have no long-term solution to fix this problem because they continue to borrow to pay their bills. They live paycheck to paycheck plus. The next category are dishonest contractors. Now, this is a generalization because I know a lot of contractors that are completely and totally honest, but I also know just as many that aren't, frankly. How do I know this to be true? Well, number one, from personal experience, almost always when you have a good contractor, a good repairman, a good handyman, then when you find this individual, you hold on to them for dear life because, frankly, they aren't easy to find. And what typically happens is they overcharge for their work, they miss deadlines, or they do poor quality work, or all three. Those are the big three in this category that you need to really worry about. The next category is supremely aggressive real estate agents. Now, like the contractor comment, I know a lot of real estate agents who are excellent at what they do. They know exactly what their buyer needs, and they know what their seller is selling, and they're good at putting the deal together, and they do it often. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the real estate agent who creates a sense of urgency where there is none. In New York, for example, when you look for an apartment, oftentimes you're told, well, you have an hour to make a decision because if you don't make a decision right then and there, somebody else will get the apartment. That used to be true maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago in the heyday of New York, but it's a lot less true today. Yet I do hear it from time to time. They use terms that aren't technically untrue, but yet they convey a different message than the one that you would probably take when you actually acquire the property. Cozy means small. It doesn't mean a place where you can bundle up and really enjoy the smallness of the area. Charming means old. And up and coming means that the neighborhood's a little dangerous right now. You get the point. The next category is disingenuous friends, people who only interact with you because they feel like you can give them something. You can provide either an advancement in their career or you can introduce them to the right people. Their motives are generally hidden. They don't tell you, for example, that I really want to be your friend, but not because I like you, but because I want to meet that person that you know at a different company because eventually I want to get in and sell them something. They're also inconsistent in their behavior, of course, because if you don't provide what it is that they're looking for, well, they're not interested in you anymore, at least until the next time. This group also has a tendency to be gossipy, and they will betray you in many cases simply because if you're of no use to them, well, why not? The next category that many of us have experienced actually is untrustworthy healthcare providers. Fortunately, it's not too hard to see an untrustworthy healthcare provider, at least not all of the time, but much of the time. So when they have telltale signs, it should raise an antenna. Now let's talk about what those are. I still remember it as if it was yesterday. This was 10 or 15 years ago, really. And I was in a doctor's office for something, and before I finished my sentence, he finished the sentence for me and then said, based on that information, I think you need surgery. He, of course, was a surgeon. Now, as it turned out, I didn't need surgery, and he finished my sentence with the wrong thought. And so that was a starting point, but I didn't necessarily know that I had been taken in a particular direction because he's the surgeon and I'm the patient. What did stick out with this doctor is that he was way too enthusiastic about me having that surgery. What I want from a doctor is for he or she to be very stoic and very thoughtful in terms of their process and to follow a process, to ask me a lot of questions, to allow me to ask them a lot of questions, and to have an interaction. That was just missing in this conversation. This leads to poor quality of care, of course, because if every time you go to a doctor and say that you have a stiff knee and the doctor responds, you need knee surgery, well, either you're going to have a lot of knee surgery or you're going to get a second opinion and come to a different conclusion. By the way, that may have been the right decision for somebody, it just wasn't the right decision for me. And in this day and age, because of the way the medical profession and frankly insurance works, it's a high volume type of business. So you need to process therapy and surgeries and activity in order to generate the income that you need to generate to make a decent living as a doctor. It didn't used to be that way, but that's the way that things are today. Another telltale sign is inconsistent communication. If, for example, your doctor says he'll get back to you on Tuesday and you don't hear from him until Friday, well, that's a sign. If they're canceling your appointment on the day and they do it regularly because they're either in surgery or something else came up, well, that's a sign. The next group of people are what I call predatory lenders. Now, for those of you who've been following my channel for a while, you'll remember the story I told you about my daughter. My daughter had just turned 18 and she went to the mall to buy some cosmetics. She walked into one of the cosmetic stores and they told her that if she subscribes or if she gets the credit card that they're offering, she'll get 20% off and that she can cancel it immediately after she purchases the product. She came home and she was telling me about all of the stuff that she bought, and it was a lot of stuff. And then, frankly, I was paying attention 50%, 55% because I was doing two things at once. And what caught my ear was the fact that she signed up for a store credit card at 18. Now, at that moment, I paused and I said to her, tell me about the store credit card. And she talked about how nice the salesperson was and how the application process was really fast and how she had a credit limit of $1,000 and she charged $225 on her card. First of all, I thought that's a lot of money. But second of all, I thought, how can an 18-year-old with no job get a credit card? Until I dug deeper into it. And she had a card that had a 32% interest rate. So they have a lot of defaults, in other words. And fortunately or unfortunately, the purveyor of the credit card process in the background, it wasn't the store, obviously, it was a bank or a quasi-bank, gets a lot of people that cancel after they make purchases. She immediately canceled the credit card, and I didn't think about it at the time, but I was going to work with her to get it paid by the end of the week because the due date wasn't for another 3 weeks. At the end of the week, we paid the credit card in full, and the check went out, regular mail, and about a month later, she got a late notice saying that she owed $30 in late fees because the payment had not arrived at the time they sent out the late notice, which was a week earlier, and the day after this company cashed the check. But she had this $30 late fee, certainly more than any interest payment on that card for 1 month. I immediately sent the $30 in, and 30 days later, I got notice that the late fee was late, and there was another $30 fee on top of the $30 fee. At which point I sent in the late fee with a signature verification through the mail, and everything stopped. But I can only imagine what would happen to the average 18-year-old out there who's never had any type of credit card or any dealings in financial matters at all. What would happen to them? They'd get late fee after late fee after late fee, and eventually, at some point, their credit would either be hurt by this behavior by the predatory bank, or they would have paid their dues and enough would be enough. And a bonus one for you, number 11, get rich promoters. And let's actually talk about this, because somewhere in the scheme of events, the reason that what they're promoting seems so real is because at one point it probably was. For example, if you went online and you found this proprietary trading system that you could invest your money in, and it was $1,000, and they would teach you everything you need to know to be a day trader. Well, the system that you bought, the secret system that you bought, was also purchased by another 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people, and probably doesn't work very well. And the fact is, there were arbitrage opportunities for things like buying on Amazon and selling on eBay, where you can find a dozen products that you're really good at knowing are undervalued on one platform or the other, and just have one shipped to the other. Now, the platforms got smart. Amazon said, if you do this, we'll kick you off the platform. I'm not sure about eBay, and the FTC might have gotten involved as well. But the point is that at one point it worked. But by the time it gets to you and the get-rich scheme is presented to you, it sounds like a great idea, but you and 10,000 other people are doing it, or worse yet, it has been outlawed, and now you're doing something that you shouldn't do. Gang, I hope you like this video. It's a little different than what I normally put out, but the information is timeless. And frankly, I think it's due because of the world we live in today. And if you like this video, check out that video, 7 Things That a Retiree Should Never Disclose. Also, don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications so that you get alerted the next time I post a video. I post several times a week. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.